Step into the chilling world of ASMR stories and ASMR horror stories as we lead you deep into the haunted heart of Coldwater Trailhead, where every whisper in the pines feels like it's meant for you. You're listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I remember pulling up to the Coldwater Trailhead just as the sun dipped behind the ridge line. The shadows stretched across the gravel lot like dark fingers reaching for my tires. The forest beyond looked dense and tangled, its canopy a mess of pine needles and blackened limbs swaying in the evening wind, and I swear to you, there was something about the way those trees moved, like they were breathing in unison, inhaling when I stepped forward and exhaling when I paused. The air was thick with the smell of wet bark and something faintly metallic like rusted iron. I knew it was late in the season, but the quiet was too heavy, like the kind of silence that pushes against your ears until they ring. The trail map nailed to the weather. Warped wooden sign was faded, and the printed words looked like they had bled into the paper. Over years of rain and snow, someone had scratched something deep into the frame. The wood looked like a knife, the letters jagged and uneven, spelling out "Turn back," and the rest of the warning had been scraped away, so all that remained was that rough command staring at me while the wind picked up and the pines began to whisper in a way that felt too human to be just. Jesse had heard stories about Coldwater before, but never from anyone who had actually hiked it. Everyone seemed to know someone who knew someone who swore a cousin or a neighbor's friend had gone missing out here years ago. And every time the story came up, the details would change. One version claimed they heard singing in the trees. Another said they found piles of deer bones stacked neatly by the trailhead. And one said hikers returned after days, but no memory of where they had been, only that they kept dreaming. Dark water and voices in the wind. It had the ring of 100 campfire tales. But I could feel in my gut that this was more than a local legend. Gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped past the sign and onto the trail, the forest swallowing me in just a few paces, the light dimming to a strange green glow that made the air feel colder. Pine needles underfoot muffled my steps, and the smell of the forest deepened the metallic tang, sharper now as if the air itself was bleeding. I had hiked plenty of trails alone before, but there was a wrongness here. Like the forest was aware of me. Like every tree was leaning in ever so slightly to listen. The path wound between ancient trunks, their bark rough like alligator hide, and here and there I saw carvings shallow and strange like runes or old letters I couldn't place. And the deeper I walked, the more I realized they were fresh. Something in the distance made a soft snapping sound like a twig under a careful footstep, and I froze, my heart beating a little too hard in my ears. The forest around me stilled, the whispering gone, replaced with that swollen silence again. I could swear I felt it then, a breath against the back of my neck, warm and slow, even though there was no one. The ray turned, slowly scanning the trees, expecting to see someone watching me. But there was only the endless wall of pine and shadow stretching into the dark. What unsettled me wasn't just that I was alone, but that it felt like I wasn't alone in the way you can feel someone behind you even when you can't hear them. The kind of presence that weighs on the space between your shoulder blades and makes you want to walk faster. Without thinking, why the trail dipped down into a hollow, where the pines crowded so close together their branches tangled overhead, shutting out what little light was left. The ground here was soft and uneven. I saw patches of black water pooled between roots, reflecting faint slices of the dim sky. I stepped carefully around them, but the pools seemed to grow the deeper I went, and soon the trail itself was spotted with them, as if the forest floor had been hollowed out from beneath. Was slowly sinking in one of those pools. I saw something pale just beneath the surface, like the curve of a cheekbone, and for one awful moment, I thought it was a face, its mouth open in a silent scream, staring up at me through the water. My boot slipped on the muddy edge and I stumbled back, splashing dark water across my pants. But when I looked again, the pool was empty, just ripples fading into stillness. But the metallic smell was stronger than a very pressed on telling myself. It was just my imagination and the fading light and the long day behind me, but the air was so heavy it was like wading through invisible water, every breath slow and thick. I could hear the pines whispering again, but now the sound had a rhythm to it, almost like words that I couldn't quite make out. I passed another carving in the bark of a tree, this one shaped like an open eye with lines radiating outward. And when I touched it, the wood felt warm. Somewhere ahead there was movement, quick and low, something slipping between the trees, too fast to see clearly, and my legs moved before my mind caught up. I was walking faster, my boots finding the path without thought, but the faster I went, the more the forest seemed to bend inward until the trail narrowed and the trees closed, ranks pressing in, so close I could feel their bark against my arms. And I swear to you, in that tight stretch, I felt something press back from inside the trees like a heartbeat under the woodwind. The trail finally opened into a small clearing. I stopped and let out breath I didn't know I had been holding. The clearing was ringed with stones, each one carved with the same symbol I had seen before, but now the carvings were deeper and darker, as if burned into the rock. The grass inside the ring was dead and brittle, crunching under my boots, and in the center there was a stump worn smooth with age, but stained dark at the top, as if something had been poured over it again. Again the wind died completely, the whispering stopped, and the silence was so complete it was like the world had been muted. I felt my skin prickle and my vision narrowed, until all I could see was that stump. Something about it drew me forward, even as every nerve in my body told me to turn back. My fingers brushed the surface and it was sticky. That's when I heard it, not from the trees, but from the earth itself. A slow, drawn-out inhale, followed by the faint sound of someone saying my name in a voice that was almost mine, but not quite. The sound of my own name rising from the ground beneath me froze my breath in my chest. My hand trembled against the sticky surface of that stump. The smell was stronger here, a deep copper tang mixed with the wet earth and the rot of old leaves. My boots felt rooted to the spot, and the trees around the clearing seemed to be leaning inward, like the whole forest was waiting for me to make the next move. The voice called again, softer this time, like it was sinking deeper into the soil, and I swear I could feel the vibration of it in my bonnet. He pulled my hand away and wiped it on my pants, but the stickiness clung like sap, only thicker, darker. I backed away from the stump, and the stones crunching dead grass under my boots. But the moment I stepped past the outermost stone, the wind returned turned sudden and cold, sweeping around the clearing. In a tight circle as if it didn't want me to leave, the pines whispered again. But this time the words were sharper, the sound threading into my ears like a language I almost understood, and it made my stomach twist. Path ahead seemed narrower than before, as though the forest had shifted. While I was in the clearing, the air was colder too, and with every step I took, the trees creaked low and slow like old wood bending under weight. I didn't see movement ahead, but I heard it off to my right, a slow dragging sound across the forest floor. Then a pause, then another drag, and it matched my pace perfectly. Stopped, and it stopped. My breath made a faint cloud in the air, and I turned my head slowly, but the pines were thick, their trunks like black pillars in the dim light, and between them was only shadow. I thought about calling out, but my throat felt tight, so I kept walking. And the dragging began again. Now a little closer, the trail dipped again, and the ground was soft, with the pools of dark water wider now, reflecting nothing but black. I stepped over one, careful not to look down, but out of the corner of my eye I caught a shape just beneath the surface. It wasn't the pale cheekbone curve from before. It was longer, bent and jointed like an arm, but the elbow was wrong, the bend reversed, and the hand pressed lightly against the underside of the water as though it were glassy. Moved faster now, my breath loud in my ears, the dragging sound still there matching me. I passed another tree with carvings, but this one was split down the middle like something inside had forced its way out the wood around. The split was slick and dark like it had been bleeding. The air was getting heavier again. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into something heavy. When the trail bent sharply to the left, I caught sight of a figure ahead, standing perfectly still in the path. It was tall to tall and thin the way the trees were thin, but it had shoulders hunched forward and its head was tilted, as though it was trying to hear something behind me. I stopped and my boots sank slightly into the damp earth, my heart thudding so hard it almost drowned out the whispering. Figure didn't move, but the whispering grew louder, surrounding me from every side. I realized the words weren't in my head, they were coming from the pines themselves, from every trunk and branch, each tree speaking in its own low voice, blending into that endless mutter. My stomach turned because the sound was shaping my name over and over, and it wasn't the voice from the stump anymore. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, all speaking in unison, and my name sounded wrong, and their mouths stretched and twisted. The figure ahead straightened slowly, its head turning in a way no head should turn, the motion slow and deliberate, until the face, or what should have been a face, was looking right at me. But there was no face, just the smooth bark like the surface of a tree. And the center where eyes should be, there was a carving, that same open eye symbol, only deeper, darker than the ones I had seen perforate. Took a step back, and the ground behind me gave slightly, like I had stepped on something hollow. I didn't dare look down, but I could hear the soft sound of water moving beneath the surface of the earth, like a current running under my boots. The figure stepped forward, not walking but gliding, the legs moving wrong, bending in ways that made my stomach knot, its shoulders scraping the trunks as it passed. But the bark didn't break, it moved like it belonged to the forced turn, and ran my boots slipping on wet pine needles, the dragging sound now replaced by something faster behind me. the whispering louder until it was a roar of voices. The trees ahead blurred together, and the trail twisted in ways I didn't remember. I could feel the cold breath of the wind chasing me, and I swear it had shape to it, like fingers brushing against my back, urging me forward, but not to safe. The ground sloped sharply. I stumbled, sliding into another clearing, this one smaller than the first. But the same ring of stones was there, and in the center not a stump, but a pool black as tar, and still as glass. The air here was so cold it burned my lungs, and the voices stopped all at once, leaving only the sound of my pulse in my ears. He edged toward the pool even as my legs shook. Something about its surface pulled at my eyes, like it was reflecting not the trees above, but something beneath, something deep and endless. I saw shapes, they're pale and shifting like bodies drifting slowly, and in one turn I saw my own face staring up at me, mouth open, eyes wide and unblinking. The reflection of my own face staring up from the black pool felt wrong in a way I cannot put into normal words, because it wasn't just my features looking back. It was something using my face, wearing it like a mask, the eyes too still to empty, the mouth curved upward in the faintest unnatural smile that I knew I have never made. My knees felt weak, and the ground beneath me seemed softer than before, like the soil was loosening under my weight, as if the earth itself was ready to take. May stepped back, but the pool rippled without me touching it, and the image in the water began to rise, as if the reflection was climbing out the surface, swelling outward like a thin sheet of skin, stretching over something that wanted to push through. I turned to run, but the trees on the far side of the clearing were closer than they had been just moments before, their trunks overlapping and twisting together until there was no way out but the way I had come. And behind me I heard that dragging sound again, only now it was wet, like something heavy being pulled through muddy boots, dug into the dead grass. As I ran back toward the trail, but the air thickened in my lungs, and the pines leaned so close their branches scratched against my jacket. The whispering began again, louder, sharper, threading around my thoughts until I could not tell which words were theirs and which were mine. I stumbled over a root and my hands hit the ground. It felt warm, like the earth was alive and breathing beneath my palms. I forced myself up and kept moving, but the trail twisted in ways that made no sense, the trees changing shape, the carvings multiplying with every turn, eyes open and staring in the bark, each one etched deep enough to glisten with something dark that was not sap. I could feel them tracking me, their gaze pressing against my back like weight. When I looked quickly over my shoulder, I caught the figure again. Only now there were more than one, their long limbs bending wrong, their faceless heads all carved with that deep open eye that would around the carving, slick and pulsing as though it had vines. They were not chasing me with speed. They didn't have to. Every turn I took brought me closer to them somehow, and the path seemed to fold back on itself, leading me in circles. I could smell the metallic tang stronger than ever, so thick it coated my tongue, and I realized it was coming from me. My sleeve was wet, my hands sticky, without me remembering anyone, and when I held it up in the dim light, it shone dark and wet. Whispering swelled into a single phrase, repeated over and over, my name followed by come back, until it became one long unbroken chant. The trees ahead shifted apart just enough to reveal reveal another clearing, and I felt my stomach drop because I recognized that it was the first one. The stump still there, the ring of stone still in place, but now the stump was not empty. It was crowned with something that looked like a head, but was shaped in rough bark and splintered wood, and in its surface my own face was carved eyes. Open mouth closed, but breath Angie froze, unable to move my legs as the faceless figures stepped into the circle, their limbs brushing the stones without. Toppling them, the whispering stopped again, replaced with the sound of deep, slow breathing. I could tell it was not from one of them, it was from beneath the clearing, from the earth itself. Pressure building in the ground that made the dead grasp bent inward as though the soil were inhaling. The stump shuddered, and the carved face in the bark tilted toward me, the wood splitting slightly at the mouth, until it opened and spoke in my voice, telling me I was late, telling me I had been here before, telling me the forest had been waiting for me to come home. My knees buckled. I wanted to deny it, to scream that it wasn't true, but deep in my bones something cracked. I felt memory slip in where it did not belong, flashes of walking this trail on nights I could not remember, voices in the wind calling my name. From the moment I was born, and the feel of this soil under my fingernails, like I had dug into it myself. Ground beneath the stump split open, slow and silent, revealing a hollow space that was impossibly dark. The figures stepped aside, making room for me, their limbs curling back like branches in a storm, and from that darkness a smell rolled out, so old and deep it made my vision swim, the smell of things buried for centuries, of water that had never seen the sky, of breath that had been held for far too long. You took one step forward without meaning to, then another, the space between me and the stump closing until I could see shapes moving in the dark. Hollow below, shapes pale and bent, but moving with purpose. They were whispering now, but not in words, just that slow breath, like the whole forest was exhaling. I felt the edge of the stump under my hands again, the same stickiness clinging to my skin, and the darkness inside widened like it was smelling something cold brushed my ankle. I looked down to see a hand reaching from the soil, pale and jointed wrong, just like the arm I had seen beneath the water. It gripped me gently but firmly, and began to pull not down but forward toward the hollow. The figures around me leaned in their carvings, glowing faintly in the dimness, the ice symbols watching me from every direction, and the stump's carved face still breathing in perfect time. The minute pull grew stronger, and the voices began to layer again my name over and over. But now there was another word beneath it, a word that felt like it had weight, like it had been waiting centuries to be spoken into my ear. I knew that if I heard it fully, I would never leave this place. I would step into the hollow, and the forest would close behind me, and I would become another voice in the pines, whispering for the next traveler who dared ignore the warning carved into the trailhead. Sickening in that moment, I realized the forest did not hunt in anger, it hunted in hunger, patient and endless and older than anything I had ever known, and it was my turn to be swallowed. The hand at my ankle tightened, and the cold from its touch spread upward through my leg. Like frost creeping across glass, the whispering around me was rising again, not in volume, but in closeness, like it was slipping under my skin, curling into my chest. The figures that had been standing around the ring began to move in unison, their limbs folding and bending like branches caught in windless air, and each motion brought them closer to me, though they seemed to glide without touching the dead grass. He leaned back, trying to pull free from that pale jointed hand. But the ground beneath me shifted as if it was no longer solid earth, but something soft that yielded with every movement, and the hollow beneath the stump widened. I could see deeper into it now, and there were shapes moving below in slow, deliberate sways. Their forms almost human, but bent in ways that hurt to watch. The darkness seemed to drink the light from the clearing, making their outlines blur and fade. The smell from that opening grew stronger, a deep rot mixed with cold water and something faintly sweet that made my head swimmy. Fingers dug into the surface of the stump. I felt it pulse faintly under my touch, as though something inside was alive. The carved face in the bark shifted slightly, and I realized with a jolt that it was watching me, its wooden lips moving in slow, soundless shapes. My own breath began to match its rhythm, without me meaning to, my chest rising and falling in perfect time. But the carved mouth, the more I matched it, the weaker my grip became, the pull on my ankle growing stronger until I felt myself leaning forward. Over the dark, hollow whispering had changed now. It was no longer just my name, but a steady stream of words I could almost understand, and yet each time one reached the edge of comprehension, it twisted into something else, as if the forest itself refused to let me fully hear it. But one phrase came through clear enough to make my stomach drop. It said, "You have always been our something," and my head cracked. Then, like a door I had been holding shut for years finally gave way, and memories spilled in images I had never seen, but knew as if they were my own nights spent walking beneath these same pines and seasons. I could not remember hands pressing into the soil, carving those symbols into the bark, not as warnings, but as markers, and the sound of that deep breath beneath the ground. Always there, always waiting. The forest had been with me long before I had ever stepped onto the trail. Tonight, pale hand at my ankle gave one slow pull, and my body responded without resistance. My knees hit the soft ground just at the edge of the hollow, and the figures around me leaned closer, their faceless heads almost touching mine. The carvings where I should be glowing faintly now, not with light, but with something that felt like heat on my skin, the warmth of breath far too close. The stump's carved mouth was still moving, and I realized it was speaking in time. But the voices all around me, from the dark below, something else began to rise, not fully, but enough for me to see its surface slick and wet, reflecting no light yet, somehow holding shape, its outline shifting constantly, like it could not decide what it wanted to be. But I knew it was the source of the voice, the breath, the hunger. Its presence pressed against my chest without touching me, and my lungs felt tight as if I was breathing for it to not want the cold from. The hand at my ankle had reached my hip, and my skin there felt numb, as though it no longer belonged to me. Figures around me began to sway in time, but the sound from below, their movements bending inward toward the hollow as if pulled by a tide. My head felt heavy, and the ground seemed to tilt forward, bringing my face closer to the dark opening, and I could smell it stronger than ever. The scent of water that had been sealed away for lifetimes, the taste of metal like a mouthful of blood, the sweetness of something that had been waiting too long to feed. Told myself to pull away, to fight, to dig my fingers into the grass and anchor myself, but the soil beneath my hands hands was warm and shifting like the slow rise and fall of a sleeping thing, and with each pulse my own breath matched its rhythm more perfectly, until I could no longer tell if I was breathing or it was breathing through me. Carved face on the stump leaned closer, its wooden surface creaking and splintering, but never breaking, and I felt its breath against my ear. Even though I knew it could not, Brett Hyde spoke a single word, then a word I will not repeat, because the moment I heard it, the forest around me vanished, and yet I could still feel it in my skin. The pines gone, but the weight of them still pressing in on all sides. The clearing replaced by something deeper where there was no light, no sound, but the slow beat of something older than the earth itself. I realized I was no longer kneeling at the edge of the hollow. I was inside it, and the walls around me were not soil, but something alive, something that shifted and pulsed with each breath. Hands, not quite human, brushed against me from every direction, guiding me deeper into the dark. With every step I took, my memory of the trail above slipped away like water through fingers. I could hear the forest still whispering somewhere far above, but it was fading, and the voices here were louder, stronger. They no longer called my name, because they no longer needed to. I was theirs entire life. Last thing I remember before the dark swallowed everything was the feeling of the ground sealing over my head, the ring of stones far above closing like an ice shedding, and the forest exhaling one long, slow, satisfied breath. I do not know how long I was in that place, because time there did not move the way it does above. In the world of wind and sunlight down here, there was only the slow rhythm of breathing, pulse of something too vast to be seen, and the weight, the earth pressing on every side. The air was thick and cold, yet every breath sank deeper into me, like it was becoming part of my blood. I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed, because the dark was absolute, yet shapes moved within it, pale and jointed forms gliding without sound, their limbs brushing against me as they passed, their touch sending waves of cold through my skin that settled in my bones. Voices down here, different than the ones above, softer yet heavier, as if every word had been waiting centuries to be spoken. They spoke not to me, but through me, threading themselves into the empty spaces in my mind, where memory had been carved away, each sound sinking like roots into fresh soil. I could feel them growing in me, winding around my thoughts and pulling tight until I could no longer remember which ideas were mine and which had been planted. The ground under my feet was not solid, but it held me enough to walk, and I followed the pull without knowing, and my steps matching the deep inhale and exhale that seemed to come from all directions at once. The air tasted of wet stone and iron and that faint sweetness that had lured me to the edge. But the sound of slow dripping water echoed faintly from somewhere in the distance, yet I knew there were no walls here, only the endless shifting shape of something alive. As I walked, I began to see faint glimmers in the dark shapes of pools blacker than the surrounding shadows, yet within them I could see reflections of the world above, not as it is, but as it will be moments yet to happen. Figures standing at the trailhead reading the map, voices laughing without knowing they were already inside its reach, the wind moving through the pines in a way that carried something more than sound. I saw each one step forward just as I had. I knew their faces, I knew their voices, because they were mine. Before the forest took meth, figures around me swayed in unison as though some unseen current moved through them, each tilt of their faceless heads, bringing the carved eyes and their bark closer to me. The glow within those carvings was not light, but memory, the same memory they had given me above, and I realized they had all once walked the trailhead. They had all felt the same wrongness, the same pull, and none had left. The glow was not to guide, but to mark each one a beacon for the next somewhere. Far above, a tremor ran through the ground, and I could hear the faint sound. Their tires unraveled, the closing of a car door, the soft crunch of boots on stone. The forest above was breathing differently now, shorter, quicker breaths, the way you do when prey has entered the clearing, the way you do when hunger is close to ending. I stopped walking and felt the others stop with me, their heads tilting upward as one, the whispering growing in pitch as it carried up through the soil, through the roots, through the trunks, until it became the wind. The image came to me without effort. Trailhead in the last light of day, the weather warped sign, the words turned back, scratched deep. The same words that had been there when I arrived, yet now I saw my own hands carving them, the blade cutting through the wood, the splinters catching under my nails, and I understood it was not a warning, it was a calling, the forest's way of marking who belonged here, the message not to drive strangers away, but to bring the right ones in. Breathing in the dark swelled until it filled everything. In me, the walls, the ground, the figures, the pools, the air, all moving in one long inhale. I knew the exhale would not be mine, the sound above of footsteps entering the first stretch of the trail reached us here in the dark like a drop of water, hitting still liquid, and the ripples spread through every root, every branch, every voice. The others began to sway again, their movement slower now as if savoring the moment. I found myself swaying with them, the hunger that had wrapped itself around my thoughts tightening when the first faint sound of snapping twigs came from above. It was like a signal, the whispering surged upward and the forest answered in kind, path bending subtly to guide the newcomer, the pools widening to catch their reflection, the carvings glowing faintly ahead of them, and in my mind I could see their face clearly, wide eyes scanning the dim trail, mouth slightly open, as they realized how quiet it had become, their breath fogging faintly in the cool airy. Stepped closer to one of the black pools here in the dark, and the surface shifted to show the clearing with the stump, the ring of stones. Waiting in the dying light, I could feel the pull of it. Even now, though I knew I was far below, and I could feel the pull in them above as if some thin thread connected us. The thread tightening with each step they took, until it would be impossible to turn back. Figures beside me leaned close, their carved eyes fixed on the surface of the pool, and in that still reflection I saw the newcomer pause at the first carving in the bark, fingertips brushing over it the same way mine had, the same warmth under their touch, the same unshakable feeling that they were not alone, and I knew then that soon they would be here among us, breathing in time, with the forest whispering with us, waiting for the next breathing reached its peak. Then the long exhale carrying upward through the earth, through the roots, through the pines, until it moved here in the trailhead clearing, and I knew they had stepped past the point of return. The hunger settled into me not as pain, but as something complete, the cycle beginning again. The forest closing its branches around its new voice and above the wind. carried the sound of their name spoken in a voice that almost sounded like their own. I have walked more trails than I can count in my years of wandering through the deep woods, but nothing prepared me for the night I set foot on Devil's Switchback Trailhead. It sits tucked away at the edge of Pisgah National Forest past the stretch. Road so winding and steep that your stomach turns before you even reach the gravel lot. There's a rotting wooden sign nailed crooked to two leaning posts, and burned into its surface in dark, uneven letters are the words Devil's Switchback. Locals told me it got the name because the path curls like a snake around the ridge, and that the devil himself stalks those bends at night waiting for the careless. Where the lost he had heard the warnings, the kind that older men whisper at the gas station as you fill your tank, the kind where their eyes stay fixed on the ground, and they chew their words slow like they are tasting something bitter. They said things go missing up there, not just gear or wallets, but people hikers vanish in. The search parties find nothing, not even a torn piece of clothing or a shoe print, they also said. You could hear voices along the switchbacks when the fog comes in, and those voices sound like people you love, but if you follow them the trail bends back and the voices get closer until something else steps into view, he figured. It was just one more piece of backwoods folklore, and truth be told, I wanted to see for myself. I parked my truck in the empty lot at dusk, the last of the sunlight spilling through the trees like old copper light, and the air smelled like rain, though the sky was dry. The forest felt heavy, quiet in a way that pressed against your skin, made you aware of every breathy first bend on the trail came quick and steep, and the earth there was damp and dark, almost black with rot. My boots crunched over wet leaves, and every now and then a gust of wind slid through the branches carrying the faintest whisper. I told myself it was just the sound of the woods breathing, but then I realized the whisper was repeating the same thing over. It sounded like my name drawn out low, and slowly stopped and looked back down the trail. The lot was still visible far below between the trunks, and I could swear I saw movement near my truck, like someone slipping between the shadows, but when I blinked it was gone. I tightened my pack straps and kept walking, telling myself it was just nerves. The time I reached the second switchback, the fog had started rolling in it. Didn't drift in from the side like normal fog. Instead, it seemed to leak straight out of the ground, like it was seeping from the soil itself. The air cooled so fast my fingers ached, and the trees ahead started to blur, their trunks stretching, tall and thin, like they were being pulled into the sky. And then that whisper again, only closer, this time clear enough that I could tell it was my mother's voice, even though she's been gone for years. The ground felt less like dirt and more like the skin of something that had been sleeping a long time. The way it shifted beneath my boots was not how solid earth should move. It was like the top layer gave way and the faintest pulse shivered under my soles, as if I was standing on the chest of something alive. The wind whistled through the bent spruce trees with a pitch that hurt my ears. Each time I blinked, I thought I saw eyes watching me from deep within the shadows, but they vanished before my vision could adjust, and that almost made it worse, because it meant they were fast enough to move between blinks. Reached the first sharp switch back, a jagged turn carved into the hillside where the trees leaned over so far there branches clawed across the trail, and that was where I saw the first of the markings. They weren't carved into the bark, they were gouged deep as if something with hooked claws had raked into the trunks over and over, leaving long parallel wounds that oozed sap so dark it looked like blood in the dim light. I touched one out of some stupid instinct, and the sap was warm, almost hot, like it had just been spilled from a body. And when I pulled my hand back, it stuck to me stringy and slow to let go, and the smell that clung to my skin was not the smell of pine or earth, it was sweet, rotten like spoiled meat left too long in summer heat somewhere above me on the slope. I heard the crunch of movement, slow and deliberate, like someone placing their feet in exact spots so they wouldn't slip, but there was no trail up there. Just thick tangled underbrush and jagged rock. I called out a weak hello that died in my throat halfway out, and the sound that came back was not my echo. It was my voice, but stretched thinner and drawn out into a long croak, as if the forest itself had decided to try speaking with my throat. I could feel the vibration of it in my ribsy. Didn't want to climb higher, but the trail left me no choice, each turn pulling me deeper into that unnatural silence that wasn't truly silent. The trees were breathing, I could hear them every time the wind stopped. There was this faint expanding and contracting sound, like an enormous set of lungs hidden all around me, and with each breath I swore the branches shifted closer, bending toward the trail. Just a little more, read the third switch back, the dirt turned red. It wasn't clay. It was wet, darker in some spots, like patches had soaked up liquid from below, and the smell was stronger here, enough to make me cover my mouth, but even through my fingers I could taste it, metallic and thick on the air, and lying right there in the center of the path was something small and pale. I thought it was until I saw the empty sockets. It was the skull of a raccoon, or maybe something similar, clean, perfectly bare, but not bleached from the sun. The bone looked soft, almost fresh. When I stepped over it, I heard a crunch that didn't come from the ground. It came from the hill to my left, as if something inside had shifted its weight. The slope bulged for just a second, like something pressed against it from the inside, before sinking back down, and I swear I could see the dim circles, like eyes opening in the dirt, then slowly closing again. My phone had no signal, but I still pulled it out, thinking maybe the flashlight would help. The second I turned it on, the light flickered and dimmed, and the screen filled with a strange haze, like fog, but moving in jagged lines, and behind that fog, for less than a heartbeat, I saw a shape. It was tall, wrong in proportion, with limbs that bent too many times, and the face, or what I think was the face, had holes where the eyes should be, and inside those holes I could see movement, like tiny fingers curling and uncurling, slow, lithe trail, angled sharply again, leading into a stretch so steep I had to grab roots to pull myself up. Every root I touched felt warm, and some pulsed beneath my fingers. I knew I should turn back, but each time I thought about it, the idea slid out of my head like water through my hands, and I realized I couldn't even picture the way back anymore. I could only picture the next turn, the next patch of trail, the next set of watching eyes waiting just beyond the bend. I could hear the leaves rustling above me, and it felt like every sound was amplified, like I had a microphone pressed right to my ear, catching every breath, every scrape, every whisper. I realized that the rustling wasn't coming from the wind at all. It was terrific. rhythmic to measure like the swaying of branches in perfect time. With the thump of footsteps following me from above, I craned my neck, and the trees seemed to lean in over the trail, their limbs stretching unnaturally low-like, arms trying to scoop me up off the ground. And in the dim glow, I saw the outline of something perched high in the branches, its knees tucked up under its chin, its arms dangling down past its feet, and those hollow eyes locked on me with the kind of focus that makes your skin crawl inside out. He forced my legs to move, even though they felt like stone, and each step sank heavier into the dirt, until the trail itself seemed to resist me like the ground didn't want to let me leave. Devils, switch back. The hair on the back of my neck was wet with sweat. I swear I could hear my name hissed from somewhere behind me, not loud, not even forceful, just there in the air, curling into my ears and setting my teeth on edge. I didn't dare answer, not after the stories locals whispered about hikers who acknowledged the voice were never seen again. The incline steepened and my breath came harder. But no matter how far I went, that shape above me stayed right in my peripheral vision, climbing from tree to tree without ever touching the ground. And when I tripped over a root and slammed to my knees, I caught it pausing just ahead, crouched low on a bent oak limb, its head tilting in that same slow, deliberate way a snake sizes prey. And I saw that its mouth didn't move when it spoke my name again, this time louder, almost urgent, like it was impatient with me somewhere deep in my gut. I knew I couldn't let it reach me, so I staggered forward, ignoring the burn in my knees and palms. And that's when I saw it, the old ranger's hut rotting into the earth at the edge of the clearing. I don't know why, but I thought maybe I could hide there. Maybe whatever was chasing me wouldn't follow into a place humans had once claimed. But when I reached the doorway, the smell hit me first. Not the sharp rot of animal remains, but something sweeter, more rancid, like spoiled fruit and wet hair. And the darkness inside was thicker than the night Outsie stepped in, only enough to see, and my stomach dropped. There were rows and rows of boots lying along the far wall, all sizes, all weathered with dirt and moss, but every single one was still tied neat and tight. And some of them still have feet inside the ankles, disappearing into the dark stain along the floor. The air seemed to push me back out into the clearing, but before I could move, a long, thin arm shot down from the rafters, grabbing the frame of the doorway inches from my face, and those hollow eyes leaned into view from above, upside down, and staring right into me. That was the last thing I remember clearly before the ground seemed to tilt and my vision blurred. The next moment was halfway down the mountain, stumbling in the dark, unsure how I got there. My pack gone, my watch stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. And behind me, from somewhere high up the ridge, a voice called my name one last time. But this time I knew it wasn't asking me to come closer, it was promising I'd be back.